Maria Goretti was born into a very poor farming family in Italy in 1890. She was the third of 6 children and the eldest daughter of Luigi and Assunta Goretti. The world into which Saint Maria Goretti was born into at the end of the 19th century was marked by great technological advancement, culture, and economic well-being, all of which were unknown to this little great saint. Grinding poverty had forced the Gorettis to leave their farm in eastern Italy and move to the Roman countryside 200 miles away. Rather than a fresh start the family had hoped for, the relocation brought still more misery. Maria's short life, instead, was marked by precariousness, migrations, the tragic illness and death of her father, and ultimately the violence and her own untimely death. Despite all of this, Maria heard and lived the call of the gospel. Through her family, her tremendous faith and daily life, God molded and shaped her into the person and the saint He wanted her to be. Unfortunately, there are still those who find her story unrelatable and outdated today in the 21st century, as her story conjures up overwhelming emotions. However, today, this 11-year-old saint is regarded among the most powerful saints in our contemporary era, and for good reason. As I bring into life this tale of forgiveness, come with me as I journey to Italy, specifically to Corinaldo and Nettuno, as I retrace and walk in the footsteps of this powerful and much-needed saint for our time, Saint Maria Goretti, the Saint of Mercy. In my last vlog, I began to trace the early life and roots of Saint Maria Goretti and her family as I journeyed to the hilltop town of Corinaldo in Italy's Central East Marche region. Maria, or Marietta as she is fondly called by the locals, lived here in Corinaldo until she was 6 years old. However, because of the difficulties of farm life and with not enough food to eat, the Goretti family had to move to the Roman countryside, first to a place called Pagliano, where they met father and son, Giovanni and Alessandro Serenelli. These 2 men began working with the Gorettis, but because of Giovanni's temper, the landlord fired the 2 families and the group had to emigrate once again and found themselves in a notorious area called the Pontine Marshes in La Ferriere di Conca, near the seaside city of Nettuno, where they were forced to live and work. As I continue my journey in Corinaldo, I also go to the city of Nettuno near Rome, where I want to set a shout out to Brett Thoman, who was my tour guide in Corinaldo, and also to Barbara, who in turn took me to the sites related to Saint Maria in Nettuno. Alright, so Brett, let's talk about Saint Maria's holiness.
Sure.
Saint Maria didn't just become a saint because of those last minutes before she died and after she was attacked.
Right. So she was considered a saint for most of history and really canonized based on what happened in the last 24 hours of her life. So we can use the expression a 24-hour saint. She was canonized because she died as a martyr, really, that she died giving her life as for love of purity, and she was killed because of the hatred of purity or hatred of chastity. So when she died, she was considered a martyr because she died, was killed by a man who hated a particular Christian virtue. So a martyr is someone who dies for Christ, but you can also be a martyr if you die for a Christian virtue. So she was canonized and beatified because she died as a martyr. Now, today, it's I think harder to make that case. You can make the case, but the message I think a lot of modern people, particularly women, will hear is that if someone is trying to attack and rape a woman, she's supposed to give her life and die a martyr or she's supposed to fight, or if she is not able to fight him off and she is raped, that somehow I think some women today might feel like somehow they're participating in this sin in a certain way. That's not the message. That's never been intended to be the message, but I think today people might interpret that as such. So today I think there's a desire to kind of go back and say, okay, so was Maria Goretti a 24-hour saint? The last 24 hours of her life, she fought off, a 12-year-old girl, 11-year-old, or 20-year-old man. She fought him off as much as possible, refused his advances, and the 24 hours that she suffered, she was forgiving him all the while. That was the culmination, really, of the holiness of her life. As the researchers have looked into her background, they've concluded that she lived a very holy life for short years. She was not even 12. She lived a holy life in that she was a quiet girl. She was a quiet saint, I should say. She was from the country, and if you look around us, I don't know if you can pan around or show what's around us, we're at the place where she was born. This is her, the house of her birth house, the farmhouse right behind us. And it's a special place here, and you can kind of see just briefly around us, and you can hear the birds and the bird song. Even today in 2025, this is a rural area. So you can imagine back in 1890, 135 years ago, what this place was like and how rural it would be. But she grew up in a place like this, very much a farm girl. She didn't have any formal education. Her mother taught her to read maybe a little bit. She went to catechism later on, just shortly before she died. She really didn't have much education. But the way she grew up was the way her family raised her. So they prayed the rosary together, they prayed devotions together in the family, and especially she was virtuous in the house, that she helped out in the house. Okay, so she never complained, she did what she was told, she was obedient.
Maria led an ordinary and even unknown life, both in Corinaldo and in their new home in La Ferriere. While Maria's father, Luigi Goretti, labored in the fields with Giovanni and Alessandro, Maria helped her mother with the daily household chores, such as fetching water from the well, cleaning the house, and preparing the meals. For young Marietta, it was increasingly difficult. Due to her many responsibilities in the house, she wasn't able to go to school. With other family members, the Gorettis walked to Nettuno, which was 10 kilometers away, to sell pigeons and eggs. The spirituality of the Gorettis was their only source of solace. Maria was very devoted to her family, and her religiosity was traditional, like most farm children of the day. Central to Maria was prayer, obedience, humility, modesty, and devotion to the Blessed Mother and the saints. Each evening, Maria recited the rosary with her parents and siblings, even joined by the Serenelli men. Maria was known to have a serious and reserved nature, but she was known by the locals as an angel of a daughter, and was always seen praying frequently in the local church in front of an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary. To date, there are no known photographs of Saint Maria Goretti, but recently, 2 photographs surfaced which people have speculated might have been the young martyr. Regardless if it is Maria or not, the girl in the photographs does paint a portrait of what Marietta must have looked like in early 20th century Italy. Life and work in La Ferriere became unbearable, and the first tragedy to strike the Gorettis was the death of Luigi, Maria's father, on May 6, 1900. Luigi had contracted malaria and in less than 2 weeks passed away. Overwork, exhaustion, and the lack of sleep contributed to Luigi's demise. Before dying, Luigi urged Assunta to return to Corinaldo, realizing the error he had made in accepting the partnership with the Serenellis, and perhaps sensing that something serious would happen if his family were to stay with Giovanni and his son. As peasants, Assunta had no choice but to stay in La Ferriere, because if they returned to Corinaldo, they would starve. During the funeral, Giovanni and Alessandro Serenelli were among the men who carried Luigi's casket and were seen to be genuinely moved by the sudden loss of Mr. Goretti. Maria was only 9 years old when she had lost her father, and now Assunta was forced to take her husband's place in the fields, all while still taking care of the younger children. Years later, Assunta recalls what Maria had told her after Luigi had died.
Mother, do not worry and be brave. We're all growing up and we can divide the work here. God will help and provide for us. You'll see.
Though heartbroken, Maria grew strength from her faith and comforted her mother and assured her of God's protection. As the eldest Goretti girl, Maria offered and agreed to take her mother's household duties. Being very close to her father, Maria would frequently go to the cemetery and kneel by the gates, praying for Luigi's soul.
And even after her father died of malaria, she told her mom, she said, Mom, she's 9 years old, 10, and she said to her mom, she said, okay, it's okay, God will provide. You go in the field and take Papa's work in the field. I'll take over the work of the house and I'll look after my little siblings, the other small children, and I'll take care of the housework. So here you have a 9-year-old child who's volunteering to take on a 14-hour day, and they didn't have running water, so you had to go back and forth to the well. You had to get the water, carry it in, wash the clothes, wash the dishes, cook, clean up, pressing clothes, ironing clothes all day long. So you have a 9-year-old girl who's saying, it's okay, I'll take on that myself. I've got young children, they were young. I mean, I have a hard time getting them off the cell phone and off the TV to go take their dishes and put it in the sink. So you can get an idea of the kind of life that this young girl lived, because the final 24 hours of her life were the finality of that point. And if you had a person who was not quite virtuous, let's say a little, imprudent, a little sloppy, just didn't really care, was disobedient to the parents, is she gonna really give her life to fight off this guy, or just let him have his way and say, you know what, I'm not gonna, if this guy's gonna kill me, I'm just gonna let him do what he wants, and then I just won't tell Mom about it, okay? Some people would do that, but she said, you know what, she had a sense of right and wrong, a strong sense of virtues.
Father Claudio Piccinini of the Passionist Order and founder of the United Society for Religious, Priests, and Laity to Promote Peace and Love According to the Gospel Message, offers his insights on Saint Maria Goretti.
Well, she was not educated. It was the family. And this is where I would imagine today we could use a little bit of that, to say the least. You also have to compliment the mother and the brothers and everybody else that lived with her. Right. Even though at this point the father was not present, he died. Right. But the family helped her to understand what was good and what was not so good, what was right and what was absolutely wrong. And that's what she did. She just practiced what she had been told.
So Saint Maria Goretti was a saint even if she was never attacked and killed, even if she lived her life, got married, had her own family, had her own children, moved on with her life. She would have continued to live a holy life, a virtuous life, and eventually been not canonized by the Catholic Church, because canonizations don't determine they don't limit who's in heaven. They don't tell us everybody who's in heaven, but the very few people who have that process looked at, it confirms that these people are in heaven. So that never would have happened to her had this attack never taken place, but she would have very likely been a saint because she was a very holy, virtuous person.
Maria's mother, Assunta, described what daily life was like for her eldest daughter after Luigi's death. Assunta and Maria would be the first to wake up before everyone else. She described their day as,
when we made the weekly bread, we had to get up even earlier. After saying prayers, we would get washed up and then dressed. I would begin working outside while Maria would look after the hens and chickens in the pen. Then Maria would return inside to prepare breakfast. When it was ready, she would wake the children, help them dress, and say their prayers with them. Then she would tidy up the house. If there was something that needed to be washed, she went to the fountain. Before noon, she would fetch water, gather greens from the garden, prepare lunch, and set the table. When serving meals, she always made sure everyone else had enough before serving herself. After lunch, Maria would iron the linens and clean the rooms. If there was shopping to be done, Maria did it. In the evening, she went to the fountain again to get water for the next morning. After dinner, she prayed the rosary and other prayers with the children, and then put them to bed. After the children were asleep, she would mend clothing and spend time talking with her mother. Often they spoke about things of the faith. On Sunday, the day of rest, everyone slept in except for Maria. She had to get the children ready for Mass. She ironed their clothes and cleaned their shoes. She ensured they washed their hands, ears, and necks. Before entering the sanctuary, she made sure they were neat. Then she helped them to put on their shoes and tie them. Once seated, she showed them how to make the sign of the cross and genuflect. She watched over them, making certain they were well behaved.
Her prayer life also was so intense, and she wanted to receive First Communion, and she was so excited to ask her mother about, so when will I receive Jesus, and praying the Holy Rosary every day, and even if she was illiterate, she was able to learn the prayers. So in spite of poverty, she was so deep into prayer and love for Jesus, for the Eucharist.
Maria had a deep desire to receive Holy Communion. Although the customary age at the time was 12 years old, she was insistent that she receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. However, this also meant that she would need time away from her responsibilities at home to attend catechism classes. Reluctantly, her mother allowed Maria to do so. Rain or shine, Maria hiked the long distance to attend catechism classes at the teacher's home to prepare herself for the sacrament. Although illiterate, Maria was able to memorize all her prayers and then taught them to the younger children. On June 16, 1901, Maria received her first Holy Communion at the church in nearby Conca, today Borgo Montello. This was Maria's happiest day. Unfortunately, her happy day would be short-lived as Maria's road to Calvary began. After Luigi's death, the working relationship between the Gorettis and the Serenellis began to deteriorate. I go to La Ferriere with the help of Barbara, my tour guide from Nettuno, and visit the farmhouse where Saint Maria and her family, as well as the Serenellis, lived at the turn of the 20th century. Today, this bright orange house is known as La Casa Martiro, or the House of Martyrdom, which is a popular pilgrimage stop for pilgrims and could be made as a quick day trip from Rome. Just like in Corinaldo, one could feel an overwhelming and powerful presence of holiness, as one is reminded that a saint once walked and lived within these walls.
You have Assunta. She's got 6 children, I think, at this point. They're all little, and she's now forced to live in this house. And they had a bigger house, but you're still living with this non-relatives, because in those days to live under the same roof with extended families was probably more common if you had a brother and uncle or extended family living together, but 2 non-related family members it could take place, but it was still unusual. So they were living together, and the father, by this point, he was getting sick. He probably had malaria himself, because there's different forms of malaria. Some of the more virulent forms kills you pretty quickly. The other ones you can live with it for the rest of your life, and it keeps you kind of in a sickly state.
And this is the father of Alessandro.
Giovanni Serenelli. He was kind of sickly, had a bit of a drinking problem. He liked to drink the wine, so he wasn't really that much of a worker.
The personalities of Giovanni and Alessandro Serenelli began to change for the worse. Assunta didn't trust either of the men, but she had no choice but to be stuck with them. The precarious state of affairs meant Assunta needed men to help her in the fields. Without Luigi, Giovanni became more domineering within the household, and he subjected everyone under the roof to his whims. He began drinking more, and he often quarreled with his son and cursed in front of the children. They also became predatory. Not many people know that the father began making advances toward Assunta.
And then the boy, by now he was about 19 or 20, and he was always been very sullen, but yet he was kind of part of the family, because by now he had lived with the Goretti family for a couple of years, and he was like a big brother, maybe a cousin to Maria and her siblings.
Alessandro Serenelli's name would forever be linked in the narrative as the murderer of Saint Maria Goretti. But he wasn't the monster that everyone painted or still paints him to be. He was just like any other young lad at the time, who was a victim to poor upbringing and poverty. Alessandro was very intelligent, who loved to read, and even had his own hopes and dreams to leave the marshes and make a living for himself. Not many people know that while Alessandro did have a sullen nature, he had a close familial relationship with the Gorettis at one point, and he acted like an older brother to Maria and the other children.
Who was like Alessandro Serenelli? So you were explaining that
Yeah.
he was like a big brother also to this family.
He's half of the story, and so he's a guy who's got problems. Okay, he grew up not far from where we are, south of here near Ancona. His mother had a form of insanity. We don't know what, but she was insane. She was committed to an insane asylum, and Alessandro didn't remember this story, but his older brother remembered and used to tell Alessandro that shortly before they committed the mother, she took Alessandro, and he was a baby. He was either an infant or less than a year old, and she was dancing around the well, and she kept saying, "I'm going to throw you into the well. I'm going to end your life right now, because it'll be better for you if you don't have to live." So this is the kind of, let's say, childhood, infancy he had. And shortly after that, they committed her to an insane asylum, and she died in the insane asylum. So Alessandra had some older siblings. One of them did his best to kind of look after him, and he was married to a woman, and she tried to kind of take the sister-in-law, really, but she tried to kind of take the role of mother to Alessandro, and did what she could. He had some teachers. He went to school. He had some education. He could read. He had some teachers, one or two good teachers, one or two bad teachers. He talked about his memories. He remembered his first communion. He received a coin from an uncle, and he was very proud of this, and somebody gave him some beautiful white shoes. Those are the beautiful memories he had of his childhood, which is really kind of pathetic. It's kind of sad. His father took a job as a courier. He got a horse and a carriage and used to pick people up from the port of Ancona, drive them down to Rome. So he was gone all the time. He took a job with Alessandro took a job with an older brother working at the port. So he was probably 14 or 15, an adolescent, surrounded by these fishermen, these unsavory characters who are going out at sea. They're cussing, they're smoking, they're doing all kinds of things, talking about inappropriate things. And these are boys who are working there. Because, again, we're in the era before there were any laws protecting workers' rights, protecting minors and the kind of conditions they can work under. So he had that upbringing, that formation with a broken family, a mental illness in the family, a father who's gone all the time, working around unsavory characters, not having anybody really there present. This doesn't excuse somebody for committing murder, but it puts the person in a context. He was a Christian. He was a Catholic. He'd been baptized. He would pray the rosary. Even after fast forwarding, now we're back to the Goretti family. When they were living together, they prayed the rosary together every night. Alessandro, the murderer of Maria, the husband Giovanni, the father of Alessandro, he would sit out the rosary, but Alessandro prayed it.
Yeah.
And with the family, and so he was a believer. He was a Christian. He was a Catholic. They would go to Mass. He would drive the horse and carriage to Mass for the family. When Luigi died, Alessandro drove the horse carriage that pulled the body and the casket of Luigi to the cemetery from the church.
And he and Maria had a good relationship.
Yeah.
They had a good friendly, familial.
He was like an older cousin, probably.
Older cousin,
to her.
yeah.
He wasn't blood, but from the time she was a girl, I mean, he'd been in the house for a number of years. Between Nettuno, the swamps, they were there for 3 years, and they were in the other house for about 2 years. So from the time she was about 6 to 11, 5 or 6 years, he was a part of their family. So, when we're 4, 5, 6 years old, we don't have that many memories. So really her earliest memories were this older boy being in the house. At one point, he wanted to be like a cowboy, because that was another role that the cowboys would...
Yes, you mentioned that in your book. Yes, please share that story.
Yeah, so there was these cowboys called butteri, which was a type of cowboy in southern Tuscany and northern Lazio, and they would herd these white cattle in and out of different farmlands and pastures, depending on the time of year. and they would have rodeos. And so he was inspired by seeing these guys, and he wanted to be one of these. So he actually had a little bit of, kind of some desire to sort of do something. He said, when you're an adolescent, you say, I want to grow up and be this. And so he said, you know what, I want to do that, which is really beautiful that he had this desire. So he went to the landlord, and he said, well, what can I do to become a ranch guy? I want to be a cowboy guy. And the landlord said, no, absolutely not. He said, you're not going to do it. He said, basically, you're just a poor peasant. You're going to stay a poor peasant. You're not doing that on my ranch.
And that shattered his dream.
It shattered his dream. And so that sort of reinforced this negative image he had of himself. And so here he is also looking at this other family who had been a functional family. Father, mother, stable. They loved each other. They prayed the rosary every night. Got 5 good children. Maria lived a holy life. I mean, she was a girl, but she would go to the market, come straight home. She didn't like it when she heard the other kids saying inappropriate things. She did what her mom said. She was obedient. She was just a good, wholesome girl. And the boys in the family, they were all good, wholesome people. So here he is seeing this mirror, and he's not seeing this holy, good family being reflected back. He's saying, you know what, I'm a loser. I'm going to do nothing. My mom's crazy. He had an older brother, too. He went to an insane asylum. It's like, here we are. We're just a bunch of crazies. My dad's a drunk. I'm a loser, too. I can't be anything. So this is all weighing on him.
His formation was not ideal. Okay? So he's an 18-year-old boy that has grown up in very difficult circumstances. So he does not have any sense of what Maria Goretti had. The idea of purity, the idea of respect, the idea of what is right and what is wrong. From what I had read, from what I understand, he was an avid consumer of pornography. That must have begun when he was younger, because the crime was committed when he was 18, I believe. And he must have grown with this, and that is not a good idea. And it becomes very important to our time when we don't have to go to the store, or you don't have to receive pictures of pornographical pictures from a friend or another person. It comes right into the front room with the television. You see things that I don't think children should be seeing. So our time is totally different from what they were living at his time. But he was not trained. He was not educated. He was not given fundamental teaching that Saint Maria Goretti had received. So what do I think about Alessandro? Alessandro was a victim. But in those days, life was not simple. If you did not have support, you would be at the mercy of everybody. So he was not formed in any way. Morals, I don't think they were part of his training. Devotion to the sacraments, like going to Mass, confession, the Eucharist, praying the Rosary, I don't think that was part of his formation. Unfortunately, his mother was not present in his life. He had a father, and the father was not very worried about what Alessandro was growing up to be. And the circumstances were not favorable for the young man. He was really in a desert. He was not what you would call a decently formed young man growing up. He was 18 years old, I believe, when he committed the crime. So what can you say? He was not trained to be a decent human being. The mother was not there. And any family that does not have both parents, but if you take off the father, you might survive decently. But if you take off the mother from the family, you take somebody that will be the primary teacher in every respect. You go to mommy, father, daddy is working out there trying to make a living for everybody. So the mother is the one that would be closest to you. But see, all these things might sound stupid, insignificant, but they are the blocks of society. These understandings, the relationships. Now, what do you do with a family that is broken up? The father is not there, or the mother is not there. I mean, you are walking with a leg, and you're trying to win a race. So it's complicated, but that's the way it is.
Alessandro plays a big and important role in Saint Maria Goretti's story, and his troubled upbringing is an opportunity for us to have an awareness for those who suffer from mental illness and those who come from broken families. Maria and Alessandro's story is about recognizing the inherent dignity of all individuals, including those with mental health challenges, and understanding that God's image is present in everyone. For the next segment, come and join me as I continue my journey to Nettuno as I follow the tragic assault and martyrdom of Maria Goretti, as well as the subsequent events that unfolded in the hours, days, months, and years after this brutal event. Don't forget to click the like and subscribe button on Anton on the Go. And one more thing, check out the reflection questions at the end of this video. Saint Maria Goretti, pray for us. God bless and Ave Maria.